TJ Pain Free. So where did the name come from first? And then do you think there's a little bit of a risk of carrying the name Pain Free? That it kind of sells people on the idea that pain-free is actually something that's genuinely achievable. I'm right out of the gate. I'm coming at you. I want to know.
It's a good question. I actually can't remember how it came about. I think I was just looking for something at the time to use my initials in. But I suppose at this point now things have changed and my opinions and views have changed. So yeah, that could be a thing. But I think suppose it comes to pain to performance, where you can be in pain but you can still perform. So I probably contradict myself between those two, but yeah, pain is going to be experienced by everyone.
Well, I suppose it's probably valid to say as well. I mean, how long are you in like doing therapy? Like how long are you working in this field?
5 years now.
So a decent amount of time, and I'd imagine your understanding of like even the evidence we have around pain has drastically changed.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like I know for me as a coach and as a personal trainer, it's something that I've learned way more. And if I look back on things I would have thought back in 2016, 2017 about pain, even like that. And this is kind of a big part of, I think, a narrative coaches, trainers and physiotherapists can kind of get caught up in, is that even if we don't verbalize it, we can sometimes carry the idea that pain is equaling damage. There's something wrong because there's pain.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something you did for me. You helped me reframe. I was experiencing low back pain. You helped me reframe that and understand that it's not necessarily this massive issue.
And that's the thing. I mean, we know from studies from years that they've done studies on basketball players where they had meniscus tears but no pain. I think it was something like 55% of them. They've done baseball players and pitchers in the States, same thing. They've had rotator cuff tears but zero pain. Pain and physical damage don't actually always go hand in hand. You can have both. You can have one without the other. And what we need to understand is that often pain is, as I suppose in layman terms, like an alarm system. So it's a warning. It's like, look, body's going, look, Ian, I don't really like this. So maybe we just kind of avoid that. And for a lot of people, they might just stop doing whatever, and then other people might just push through. That pain gets worse. Often, in my experience, what I believe is that that's just your alarm getting louder, going, hang on, I gave you a bit of a warning there. You didn't yield it. You pushed harder, and I'm just letting you know I really don't like that. It doesn't mean anything's happening. No more than when you tear a muscle. You tear your bicep instantly. That tear's done. It's not going to continue on if you go and curl again. Okay, unless you go massive, stupid weight, and obviously that you're going to make it worse. But for general, once you had an injury, for most part, it's very hard to exacerbate that beyond what's already happened. It's done. It's finished. It's over. Now it's to come back from it.
And I think that actually ties in very nicely to something you and I have talked about a little bit before, about how we communicate and the words we choose to say and how we choose to say them, both as in your case working with people who may be already injured or experiencing pain, or if I have people who are hesitant of certain patterns or certain positions or movements. The language we use around these things is paramount to how people pick up what it is they're going to do. And like that, I think it's even the word injury, I think people throw around. So I'll always try and categorize for people injury. So I would tell them an injury, if you're injured, it is basically like a catastrophic event where your training has to be altered or ceased to in its current form. And we have to like completely go back to the drawing board and work like a broken leg. You got a belt of a car, something like that. So like a muscle tear even. But like, you know, you having a sore hip or your knee hurts a little bit when you squat is not necessarily an injury. So I'd imagine that's a big part of your practice and the language you use with your clients and with your patients in the clinic.
Yeah, with that sort of downplaying anyone's issues, to me, as you mentioned, injury it's something pathological where there's actually trauma of some degree. If it's just pain during a movement, I wouldn't class you as injured, personally. Look, I have a bit of pain doing this. Cool, let's have a look at it. It doesn't mean that you're injured. It doesn't mean you can't stop doing it. If you can still do a movement, but you're sore, I wouldn't really class you as injured, to be honest. I think we reduce the impact of that word by using it willy-nilly for any ache and pain or niggle or whatever other term you want to use. But it as you say, gets thrown around and said like, oh, I'm injured. What's wrong with you? Oh, when I squat, my knee's a bit iffy. Like, yeah, it's a bit iffy. You're not broken. You know, let's just keep going. Just lighten the load till the pain's tolerable and keep training while we address it.
But I think that I wonder then if then from my side, from the coach's side, I wonder if that is an idea that's been planted innocently, and I'd imagine with no ill intent, but whether it's an Instagram post or in session with a trainer or a coach, where this idea is planted in people that if you move a certain way and it elicits a discomfort or pain, that in and of itself is risking injury? Because I know it's something you've discussed online, and I think it's a really broad topic, and this is one I really want to deep dive into here, that technique and how you move as an individual is not intrinsically tied to the pain you might feel, or moving in a way that might seem less optimal is not necessarily, or less optimal aesthetically, is not necessarily putting you at greater risk of injury.
I have a huge issue with coaches, physiotherapists, and people throwing around technique. You're injured because of the way you lift. The body adapts to everything. Okay, so if you are a lifter that starts your lifting journey from scratch, you've just walked into the gym, you start deadlifting with an absolutely dog shit flex spine, and you progressively over the time, your risk of injury is no more than me coming in with a neutral straight back and lifting. We're not dissimilar, because we've adapted. It's graded exposure, adaptation over time. The load increases as we would in any other exercise. The body adapts. It's like saying if you do a bicep curl with your hand slightly bent to the left or bent to the right, it's going to make a difference to a risk of tearing a bicep. That's just not the case. And technique has very little impact on injury risk, provided we've done sensible training in progressive overload over time. And that's really it.
This is actually a bit of a tough part of my job. So I'll try to put this to people that when it comes to injury, a lot of the time, firstly, we cannot predict injury.
Nope.
And
you can't prevent it either.
Precisely. I think we can take measures to maybe reduce likelihood,
100%,
load management, stress management, adequate recovery, things like that, and not we would say not training like a fucking idiot.
Exactly.
So, the biggest thing though is the problem is that you're basically, a drop in a pond of what is essentially well-meaning bullshit.
Yeah.
People are, I think it's like this really reductive viewpoint that if you move perfectly, you're much less likely to get hurt. But then it boils down to, what is perfect?
Well, this is the thing. There is no such thing. And your technique to me is the efficiency of a movement to suit you, your structure, and your ability. It's the efficiency of moving as much mass with as little effort as possible. Okay, and again, that comes with, as you coach your clients, it's all progressive overload. It's not something that happen over a week that your strength's going to increase massively, and no more than does your risk change to injury if you just load smartly. As you say, load management, as you say, sleep, recovery, stress, hydration, nutrition. Those are the things that you have control over, that may play a role in risk injury if one of them is way off the ball. We know that reducing sleep on an average people, less than 7 hours a night, studies show that we can increase risk of injury by 40%. That's a massive amount.
Massive.
So I'd rather be looking at my sleep than how I picked up the barbell, to be honest. And that's just the way of it is. And this idea of how a lift needs to look, really, that just is another really huge thing for me, is that people looking at videos and go, oh, well, your spine flexed a little bit there, or your squat, your knee came in a little bit. Yeah, but do you understand what's happening in that movement? Why people's knees come in? If you don't know that, stop trying to tell them not to do it, because a lot of those is just the way the body needs to move the mass.
This is actually, and you can correct me on this, to somebody who's in the know and a bit more, I would imagine, a bit more of authority on when it comes to the anatomy and things. I would always phrase it to people like this. Whenever we see, even just in that particular case, that knee valgus, the knees rotating in, I would always frame it to people that in all likelihood, it's the adductor muscles are contracting to pull the hips back under the load to try and get yourself in the best position to move the load again. If you follow, if I'm talking in the base of a squat, let's say. So when people are driving up, if the further the hips come back and the further forward the bar goes, the longer the moment term is. So this is a nice, easy way these muscles can contract to help bring the hips back under the bar. Correct? Am I wrong in thinking that?
So you're not wrong in thinking it, but fundamentally what's happening is that your adductors don't just adduct, they also extend the hip. So when the deeper you get into the hole, you will find that obviously your glutes are the more lengthened position, okay? The longer a muscle is, generally, the harder it is to contract, okay?
Right.
Or I don't like to use the word weaker, but the less of leverage it has. Yeah. So in some people, their adductors at that point have more leverage to get the hip out of the flexion it's in and extend it, And that's why you'll see the knees come in, and then it gets to a point where the glutes have the better leverage, and also the knees flick out again.
Yeah.
That's the changeover. So it's what has the best leverage on your body to extend the hip at that point.
That's really, really, thank you for that, because that is, it's good to know these things, because I think that is kind of the problem. It's, if we look at the whole scope of how people move as an iceberg, I think most of us know the tip. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
tiny little bits.
Yeah.
So even down to like when we talk about how people move and perfect technique and the way things should look. So I don't even think it, even on a 2-dimensional level, it doesn't even take into the fact that people are literally built differently. Some people
100%.
have long torso, short legs, short torsos, long legs. This is going to have a massive impact on the position of your torso during a squat, a deadlift, whatever it might be.
Your femoral length, the tissue attached to your femur, each quad's going to be different lengths. We can have the exact same femur length, you and me, but our tissue can have different lengths.
Yeah.
That's what people don't realize. It can go right, it goes very, very deep. And that's the issue, is we're painting everyone like, oh, the squat needs to have a perfect, your knees need to go up and down. And this thing of push your knees out, that's probably the worst cue you can give, because what you're doing is, if we think of something called reciprocal inhibition, by contracting one muscle, theoretically we inhibit the opposing. So if you are going to try and abduct your knees out, you're going to potentially, and in theory, inhibit your adductors, which is going to lose you leverage to get out of the hole. That is counterintuitive what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I am very, back in like 2016, 2017, I'm guilty of that cue.
Yeah.
And I there's like some old training footage of me and some clients, and I can hear myself saying, I'm like, shut the fuck up.
But the difference is, you weren't wrong at the time. You've learned more, and you've changed your perception and understanding.
I think that's kind of the hard thing for coaches and therapists, though. And
100%.
People like tend to, they hear something that makes sense and maybe gets them so far, and then once there's a narrative that challenges it, because they've associated so strongly with what it is, they feel the need to come to its defense.
Yes.
Like the pre-training stretching, for example, was obviously like the rage for a long time in terms of injury prevention and potentiating best performance. But we've since learned it's not necessary. Yeah. But there's people that still live and die on that. There's people that like make a living off selling mobility programs.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So this is the point. It's like they kind of have to die on that hill, because they've like hitched their cart.
They put their life into it, like,
yeah. So like, even though there might be evidence that now contradicts what they think. I think it takes I think you really have to remove yourself from the value of what it is, and put, especially if you're in a coaching role, to put your best foot forward as to what might actually be more beneficial to the people you work with. Yeah. But then the challenge there becomes that if what you have already believed has gotten you so far and built you up enough of a customer base or a client base or a following, and now you're going to suddenly do a 180 on it, does that then fundamentally alienate the people that have bought into your product?
It's a good question. I think it's a hard one to answer, but if you can come across and explain that, look, this is why I believed what I believed, and since then things have changed, evolved, evidence come out, and now if we look at it from this point of view, actually that negates what we believed before. If you educate your clients and your clients believe in you, I can't see why they would leave, because you've changed the way you've done things, unless it negatively affects their performance or their whatever their goal is with you. I think it's all about communication. So everyone, like as you were talking about before we started recording, is I look back on my Instagram and I was like, oh, I'm gonna start archiving some of this shit, because this is fucking woeful. Where the fuck did I think that was right? Like, but again, it's what you're taught, and this is the issue. When I got taught, the start of my course is all massage stuff, like, and you taught, you know, if you rub over here, you're gonna release this fascia, and you're gonna release this adhesion and all this stuff. It's like, oh my God, that's amazing, and look at that, it feels softer. Fuck, this is ingenious. Like, I'm gonna be a millionaire doing this every day. And then you realize that's a load of shit. Like, it's like, what did you learn from your course? Absolutely nothing. The best thing about my course that I took away from it was their explanation and education on the anatomy itself and functions of tissue and insertions and origins. But the rest of the course I don't use. Like, I just don't. I can't, like, I don't believe in it. And I know for a fact some of those people teaching us don't believe in it either. But that's their job.
They're kind of limited by the curriculum they have to teach. It's the same in, so like I've been doing a bit with Satanta College, and it's the same thing. Like you are bound by the shackles of what is in the curriculum. And the curriculum is accepted as the most up-to-date thing.
Yes.
Like I spent 3 months on FMS, functional movement screening in Yanda, and it honestly made me regret ever signing up for the course. Now, it's since moved on to other things, but like that was incredibly trying, like very, very much so. And as much as, like, don't get me wrong, I'm a fucking grown man, but like it actually boils my blood to listen to it, because a lot of I have obviously gone back to upskill as somebody who already works in the field. I'm already qualified, but there's a lot of people that's their first qualification.
Yeah.
And they are like worrying about like, you know, when you go into the bottom of your squat, you know, you've got that little bit of butt wink, or like, you know, one foot is ever so slightly more turned out to you. Like, oh, it doesn't fucking matter. Like one guy was like putting it to me because like we were overhead squatting the dowel. And he's like, you need to work on this, this, and this. And I was like, bro, I can fucking squat 280. Like, I'm good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not even like as a clout thing. It's like, I've gotten this far and I've lifted this much and I'm still able to walk.
And I'm not an Olympic lifter.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like, precisely. And that's it. And that's the way I put it to them. And I challenged a couple of the instructors. They were all very sound about it now. Well, absolutely. And in much the same boat as you've mentioned with your course, a lot of them were very much like, this is kind of what we have to teach.
Yeah.
You know, there's not really a whole lot of saying.
Teach it or leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is it. I would challenge, like, why do I, as a powerlifter or somebody who does this specific transport, or the people I'm going to work with in the general public, ever have to overhead squat?
Correct.
And now, in fairness, they said, look, maybe you don't, maybe they don't, but they were like, it's a handy screening tool because it can tell you all these things about how somebody moves. And I was like, no, I disagree. Said, because the challenge I would put to them, and anybody that uses the overhead squat, if anybody's listening, the challenge I would use is, even if you're never going to do it, you're not going to correct them, you're not going to say to anybody that they're doing it wrong. People are very dialed in. They're already nervous about coming to the gym. They're already nervous about meeting you. They already have, I would imagine, a self-image that they need to improve. And now the first thing you have them do is a very, very high skill, highly specific form of exercise that even if you say nothing, they know they're not doing it properly. They know they're fucking it up. They know they're all over the place and it doesn't feel good. And their first impression of you and the gym is, I can't do this. This is something that I'm not good at. And it creates this like a negative feedback loop. Yeah. And I think it artificially creates a barrier for participation in them. And even if you never touch it again, and for the next 3 months do totally different exercises, totally different things, that's still back in the back of their head. That's something I cannot do.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that becomes a problem.
That's the thing. And I mean, I was asked to come to a college in Galway to teach them to do workshops with their PT students about mobility and stuff like this. This was a couple of years back. And one of the things I was explaining to them, like, what do you do when you get your first client? Oh, we do a screening. What do you do? An overhead squat. Or can any of you do an overhead squat? No. Okay, so I don't expect you to be an elite level athlete to do it, but if you can't do it basically yourself, how are you going to critique a client coming in and doing it? And how are you going to correct it if you can't do it? And then how do you squat? Oh, well, their feet need to be shoulder width apart and turned out 15 degrees. Excellent. How do you know their legs are turned out 50 degrees? So I can look. Right. Just because my foot's turned what you think is 15 degrees doesn't mean my femur is. So these are things, and you say you create barriers of people because, oh, well, you can't turn your feet like that, or when you're in a squat position, you can't squat to depth, or you lean over, whatever the case is. Yeah, that's because that's not their position. We are, as we've discussed, we're completely different. By limiting people to positions and movements, we create huge issues with them. I had a client there last weekend come and see me. She struggles with was getting squat depth and making up for it by leaning forward, because we know that proprioception, if our head's lower to the ground, we assume we're deeper at the hip, which we're not. But I had her turn her feet, double her stance, and turn them way out. And if you looked at her in a normal gym, you'd be like, geez, that's a bit of a fucking weird stance. But that's the way it worked for her. Instant change in a squat, like 100% change. There's one of the urban barbell girls I had before was like a duck foot, out of feet nearly, and only because we were trying to fix her a bit of a depth and we couldn't figure it out. There was no like movement restriction or anything, just couldn't hit it. And we couldn't figure it out. I was standing across the room, I looked across and she was standing, talking to someone, and her feet were like ducks way out that way. And I was there. Hang on, let's have a second here. Can you just squat like that? Bang. We gained like 3 or 4 inches of depth. But you would never have suggested that. And again, there's no right or wrong position for someone to be in. There's no right or wrong grip. There's no right or wrong stance. And if you do say there's right or wrong, we put up barriers straight away. Yeah.
But I think the reason, I don't think it's done intentionally, but even with that, like, you create a barrier or an artificial qualifier and just another brass ring to reach, another glass ceiling to shatter, something else that you can qualify yourself with moving better, right? I think the reason a lot of PTs gravitate towards it is because it lends to this artificial sense of achievement for our clients along the way.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Oh, can you reach down and touch your toes without bending your knees? I mean, you're never going to do that ever in your life, but can you do it?
What's the purpose? Yeah.
Do you know? And then the other piece of it is, like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with have you seen the FMS? I think it's a 21-point system or something like that for the 6 tests or something like that.
A bit of it, but it's, just, I don't know,
7 tests
as you mentioned, I have the blood pressure to get too deep into it.
But this was actually where it actually runs headlong into itself, right? Because we were given the example that, so you're scored out of 21, right? Arbitrarily. I think there's 7 tests and you get 3 points. So
up to 3 points, is it?
Yes. Okay. So it's, this will tie very nicely into a good talking point for us. And I'm going to try, I'm sure there's massive advocates for it out there who are like fucking angrily typing right now. But, so number 3, if you score 3, it means that you were able to perform the task completely, whatever the task it might be, overhead squat, let's just say, or there was like the hurdle step. And then a 2 was you could complete it with some compensation.
Okay.
A 1 is you could not complete the task fully. And a 0 was if any pain was experienced. Oh, so when you got 0, it was pain experience, immediate GP referral.
And this, for a lot of people, is going to be the first time they've ever exposed their body to a position or a movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and this is the thing, like when you do, I have people sometimes message me going, oh, do you do like a full NCT, a full body assessment? I was like, no. Like, why not? I'm like, but because if you want to look for problems, I'm going to find them.
Mm-hmm.
And have you got any pain or discomfort or is any movement becoming an issue for you? No. So what do you want to look for? Because I can put you on all these famous tests and go, right, let's externally rotate both shoulders. Oh, look, your left one has significant less than your right. So what?
Mm-hmm.
Did you check that when you were born? Did you check that when you were 5, 15, 20, 25? Do we know if you've been like that the entire time? Have you any pain or issue with that shoulder? No. So then what do you want to do? And this is where we need to understand that we are not meant to be a mirror image of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just because you have some particular degree of ROM on range of motion on one side doesn't mean you're going to have the same on the other. And it doesn't mean one side's better than the other. That's just it. If you have no issue in a movement involving those ranges, don't go looking for problems. Like, if you want to be perfect, you're setting yourself up for a horrible life of failure. I hate to tell you, because that's just not the way that we are designed.
And I would actually look at that as you mentioned, like if somebody seemingly has nothing wrong, but they're coming to you almost looking for problems. I wonder, is it that? So a lot of the time when people are trying, it's like when people ask you, like, I'll get asked about like training plans or diets or whatever, it's very specifics. Is intermittent fasting good for losing weight? Like a very recent one I'll give you is one of the people I coach wants to get in better shape. So like, I want to start count my calories. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. So put her on a set number of calories each day, set number of protein, fats, carbs. Said like, just hit the calories and the protein. Don't worry so much about the rest. And then a bit of fiber and you'll be fine. It's like, oh, but do I not need to like eat less calories on my non-training days and more on my training days? I'm like, right, you are looking at the 1% difference right now. You are looking at that, like take the low-hanging fruit. You have never even written down what you've eaten before and you want to jump straight to counting and now you're worrying about alternate, like rotating it in and
cycling,
out. Yeah, I think people do it as a form of like, they would love for you to find something, the reason I haven't been able to progress my bench press isn't because I train like a dickhead. It's because my left shoulder is slightly more internally rotated than my left shoulder. My right is more internally rotated than my left. I honestly think that's what it is. And I'll just finish up this thing about the screening, right? So if you were this was what they're saying. So you'd get the 3 points, 2 points, 1 point or 0 points. And the goal of it was, if you got under 14, I think it was, you had a higher risk of injury, right? But if you got 21 out of 21, you were hypermobile and potentially more at risk of injury. So there was actually no winning, right? Because we got that. They were like, they gave us 2 scenarios where you had somebody with this score and somebody with this score. Which one is more likely to be injured based on these? And it was like one like lightweight female Olympic weightlifter who scores a perfect 21 out of 21, and one's like a rugby player dude that scores like a 9 out of 21. And they're like, actually, they're both at risk of injury because she's probably hypermobile. Given her size and her weight, she's probably not very muscular. So that the stats they gave her, but she's also very mobile. And this is so fucking stupid.
Jesus. So you're fucked either way.
Pretty much, yeah. You just may as well pack it in now. You know what I mean? That's it. That was the impression I got. And I was like, well, the good thing is we could just not do any screening and they don't ever have to worry about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
They actually, and this has gone off on a bit of a tangent, but we were told a story of a S&C coach for one team. I can't remember the name of the team. I know it wasn't like a big important team. It was like some local rugby club or GA club or something like that. It's playing a bit of GA. And they did the overhead squat test on all the players. So 20 players did the overhead squat test, right? All failed. So they spent 8 weeks working on it, right? Now, they all improved the overhead squat. They were all got perfect. Most of the team got 3 out of 3 on the overhead squat, yeah?
Did the field sports improve?
They got slaughtered.
Yep.
Because they spent 8 weeks working on something that did absolutely nothing for what they do on the pitch.
Well, look at and this is the thing. I know there's no such thing as, I don't believe there's such things as functional, dysfunctional movement, okay? In the sense that every movement is functional because we just move, like, right? But there is exercises, accessories, things like this that can add to your sport by just potentially even just making you stronger in a range, stronger in making you more muscular, more mass, things like this. But like, at what point in that sport are you ever going to need to be in that same position for leverages of an overhead squat? You're not ever. Like, they'll probably go 100 times more value if you just did box jumps.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's also what value, like, firstly, what is squatting a dowel or a whatever overhead ever going to do for somebody who's playing, like, it's not even loaded enough for them to yield any.
It's repetition of position. Mm-hmm. And all that does is make you comfortable in that position. It doesn't give you strength in the position, it just makes you comfortable in it. And
do you know what? That point actually is very, very good, because this is how I would frame things a lot to newer clients when they're worried. So, like, this is what I would say to anybody that's new to the gym. They come in like, was that all right? Did I do that well? Like, probably not. Like, but it doesn't matter, because between now and 6 months, no matter how much I correct you, you're going to look totally different. You're going to move totally different, because you're going to become much more adept in the skill of what we're practicing. Because right now you're new, your body hasn't a clue what the fuck we're doing, where it's just moving all over the place because it doesn't know how to stabilize this external load. But as we practice, it's going to get better and better and better, and you're going to be able to demonstrate more strength in that range, or push more force through that range.
Yes.
So that's, like, even when it comes to, if I have somebody, like, occasionally I'll get people come in that just want me to look at their technique on something. Like, oh, can you come look at my bench technique, my squat technique, my deadlift? And I might give them some tangible little bits of feedback that I'll say, now, this is the point. This might make you more efficient in this range in the long run, but don't expect to add 10 kilos to your bench right now, because you've obviously ingrained this one way of moving. So even if all I'm having you do is move your elbow from here to here, that might not pay off for another 6 months, and it might only be an extra 2.5 kilos on the bar.
Or it might go the other way.
Exactly.
Briefly. Do you know?
Absolutely. Because you're training out of a range completely. And then there is always that worry in people that if they do something wrong, they're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
But I would always equate it back to, if we have a little kid and they're on a bike and they fall off, you don't go, oh, Jesus, oh, God, right, I'm going to set you back up. And remember, you're going to hold onto the handlebars, you're going to brace your core, and you're going to pedal at even intervals on each leg. You're not going to blind them with analysis. You're going to get up and go again.
Yeah.
Because they'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I sort of explain it to people that every movement we have has sort of like a map in the brain as to how to perform it. You don't actively think, when I'm going to walk across the room to pick up an item, you don't actually think of which muscle needs to move in which manner or which order. Your body just does it, right? Mm. So when a new movement happens and that the body's never experienced or done before, as you said, it's uncertain. It's finding its feet, you know. So the more you repeat it, and you'll find this with people, if you get someone to do 30 reps of a brand new movement, very light load, but just 30 reps, look at what rep 25 looks like compared to rep 2 or 3, because the body starts adapting pretty damn quickly, especially the new movements, and it starts finding its feet as to what the map of that movement, how do we get from here to here, which route do we take? And that's how it figures it out, by repeating it non-stop. No more than anything. That's how you learn. That's how your body learns. It's the exact same thing. So those people, yeah, you might fall over doing your split squats, but like after a couple of weeks, you probably won't. And your balance probably get better, and your load will start increasing, and your confidence will be. But as you say, don't overanalyze at the start. Just fucking do it, like. And if you fall over, get back up, keep going.
Well, as you saw when I came down here, raced down here on my little road bike, the first day I got it and I took it out, I was a little wobbly on it. Geez, I haven't rode a bike in years, you know? So I looked like a big jackass cycling around my housing estate. Like, what am I doing? Like,
stabilizers on though.
Yeah, like, but there was all these like teenagers whipping back and forth from school, and I'm such an asshole right now.
Yeah, of course.
These kids are so good. But like, again, within a matter, I think 2 or 3 days, it just all started to come back.
Yeah.
Like Dexter said, it's like riding a bike.
Exactly.
You know, so it all came back, and now I'm an absolute menace of the roads. Like, but it is a very good point though, because one massive thing I'm constantly asked about, and it doesn't matter if it's somebody who's 3 or 4 years in powerlifting, if it's somebody who's their day one in the gym, it's what should I be doing to warm up? Right. And this is something that's still so deeply ingrained. It's still to this day in regular commercial gyms, they still will go through this process of having you do warm-ups that are completely unrelated to the skill you're about to engage in. So I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because I know you've probably seen yourself. There's people who will not touch a barbell before they've done their 20 minutes of foam rolling, their corrective split squats and mini band work. Where do you think, firstly, this stems from? What do they think they're getting out of it? And what would your advice be to those types of athletes?
So firstly, to me, warming up is, as you sort of put it there, is preparation for the movement you're about to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the best way to do that movement is do it with a lighter load. Like, it really is that simple. Okay. For a lot of people, there are people that more experienced people that go, right, they'll start it off, and if something feels off, they might go and do whatever they think is going to help and come back to it. And there's people that, as you say, will not touch a bar, and they'll be in the corner, they're doing everything they do. I think it stems from, it goes back to this whole theory of if we don't stretch, we increase risk. If we foam rolling might reduce risk of injury. All these myths, I think, is where it still stems from years. To me, static stretching is what is the best word? It's cultural, in that it's just being done. No one actually knows why they do it. They think they know what it's doing, but it's not doing what they think it is. So it just becomes habitual, and we just do it for the sake of doing it. And then we get this mindset where fear sets in, that if we don't do it, is my session going to be shit? Or if I have a shit session, it's because I didn't do X, Y, and Z, which just isn't the case. That's in your head, okay? You are going to have shit sessions, no matter whether you warm up or not. They're going to come and they're going to happen. Deal with it. It's life. You cannot have a perfect session just because you did X, Y, and Z previous, right? So a lot of it comes to the whole risk of injury. Warming up, in theory, is raising your temperature. My argument to that is your body's its homeostasis point is that it needs to remain 37 degrees Celsius internally anyway. So what happens when you warm up? You start sweating. Why? Because your body's trying to cool itself down. So what is the purpose of spending 15 minutes on a treadmill to start sweating before you go to squat? There isn't any. And there is absolutely no evidence that suggests it's going to make anything different to your training. So I don't believe there is a purpose of doing stretching, foam rolling prior to training, unless you have a specific issue that needs to be addressed or is ongoing until it's been addressed properly, which isn't going to be resolved by foam rolling and stretching anyway. So to me, I'm not the strongest lifter in the world, but whether it be bench, squat, or deadlift, I start with a 70 kg bar. I don't use an empty bar, straight 70 kg, and that's how I go. I'm 40 this year. I haven't, Jesus, a bit of touch wood. I haven't injured myself doing that. I'm not saying I'm perfect or I'm an example to use, but whether you're 19 or 40, unless you have an actual issue that needs addressing, there's very little evidence-based benefit to spending 25 minutes doing something. Say, for example, Jane Jones.
Yeah.
Right. A couple of years ago, she had a back issue, and she was spending, I think it was 35 to 40 minutes doing a certain routine before she would squat. We had her back injury was gone, back pain or whatever the issue was is gone, and we had her down to 15 minutes before she got towards nearly her working sets. So we cut nearly 30 minutes off of her warm-ups per session. You train 4 days a week, that's 2 hours less in the gym. Do you know how much we can do in 2 hours outside the gym? Do you know what I mean? So if we look at things, there's time can be saved by just not doing things because you've seen it. And the same goes for my page. If you've seen something on my page, doesn't mean you should be going and doing it as better than seeing someone else's page, but use it for your situation. If you don't have any issue, just get under the bar, build that confidence in that you don't need to do it. Take that mindset away from using a crutch like a foam roller, stretching, whatever that routine is, the McGill Big Three that everyone thinks you have to do before you do deadlifts, bench, and squat. You don't have to do any of that shit. Nothing is forced upon you. Just move.
Do you know, I agree with everything you're saying, naturally. I'm sure, you and I recently enough, we were both down in Amsterdam at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, and you're probably seeing I'm the first person, I go over to the bar and I just start squatting. I don't do all this bullshit on the floor, right? But I will take I will give certain caveats, and I'm sure you'll actually agree. I don't think we disagree on anything at all here, but just for the people that are listening who maybe are getting triggered right now, there are certain caveats here. As you mentioned, if somebody has a specific thing they do because they've been advised to do it by a physiotherapist or a doctor or whatever, sure, whatever, do what you got to do, right? The other thing I would say is I think there's an importance of ritual. I think for a lot of the time, people kind of know, you know what, I know I probably don't need to foam roll for 10 or 20 minutes before I ever touch a barbell, but I like how it feels. And there's nothing wrong with that.
So that the caveat is, if you like doing what you're doing, fire away.
Mm-hmm.
All I'll say to you is, no more than anything or anyone you follow, whatever, if you understand what something is or isn't doing is very important than just doing something for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to understand that if you're doing, say for instance, static stretching, you're not lengthening tissue, you're not reducing risk of injury. In fact, if you really want to get scientific, you're reducing the ability of a muscle to produce force.
Mm-hmm.
You're making yourself weaker, technically. And
It's
also reaction times. Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly. It's like, it's probably negligible in real life, but if you want to get really scientific, that's what you're doing. You're not doing you're not lengthening tissue, because we know to lengthen some tissue by 1%, we need 900 kilograms of force. That's 5 Jake Brennans jumping on you, 6 Jake Brennans jumping on you, like, or pulling you at one time.
Good
Do you know what I
grief,
mean? Like, so it's one of these things. If it works for you, fire away, but just understand you don't have to do it. And for the vast majority of people, you could probably save yourself a shitload of time by not doing it. But if you have the time to kill and you like it and it feels good and you think it's helping you, fire away. But just understand that it's a lot of the stuff you're doing isn't doing what you think it is.
Yeah. I like to be a smart ass. People ask me, do you not stretch or anything? I do. I stretch with the bar. I'm bringing my muscles through length and contraction.
Full range of motion under load it gives you, in my opinion, more benefit than static stretching, because to me, your body is going there willingly. When we stretch, we almost get to a point where we're sort of forcing a position.
Mm-hmm.
When you notice, if you're feeling, some lifters will listen that are listening will know this. If you start squatting and you lift that can squat 320 kg, for example, you will know that at 70, you might feel like you're not really getting depth. And as you warm up, you'll notice things get easier and better. Why? Because your body's getting used to it. It's adapting to that movement. So that's what people forget, that they think if they get in the empty bar and they can't get to depth, or they're feeling tight in inverted commas, that there's an issue. Why don't you just keep going and see what happens? Because I guarantee you, if your body's comfortable, that range will come. We need to get away from mobility being the cause of restrictions and pain, when the way I look at it is that pain will dictate your mobility. Your body will only go where it's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you want to force that? Do you know?
It's a great point.
And that's when I spoke to you about the overhead squat. It's repetition of position. If you repeat a position over and over again with little to no pain, and I say little pain, I always say to my clients, if you keep your pain below roughly a 4 out of 10, keep training.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can keep that range of motion under load to below a 4 out of 10 in your relative pain threshold, I guarantee you that range will increase to the point where anatomically you can't go anymore. Structurally, you just physically can't.
Yeah.
But we need to be comfortable for us to achieve a certain range of motion. And this is the thing. I feel sorry for people, and this isn't to be condescending. I feel sorry for people that have like mobility days where they spend like an hour doing like these weird and wonderful mobility drills. Whereas realistically, a traditional exercise performed to your current range of motion with little to no discomfort or pain will yield a much long-lasting and beneficial result.
Absolutely. And this is, I suppose, when you're looking at things this closely, like if we're talking about like that, like, you know, do people need to do these things prior to training? Do people need a full mobility day? Probably not. But I suppose if I'm going to, and again, this is not a contentious point, because like I said, I agree with you. I'm of the exact same mindset. When people ask me how to warm up, I go, I do start with the empty bar. I'll say do somewhere between 10 and 20 reps with the empty bar, and then see how you feel. Yeah. And then load accordingly and base it off how things are feeling that day. You know, like I have the same rough jumps, and then I get to a point in my loading where I'm like, right, if I'm feeling a bit shit, I'll do this weight. And if I'm feeling pretty good, I'll jump to this weight.
Yeah.
However, the one thing I will say, I suppose not in favor of those things, but as a massive zoom out, is if the only exercise somebody was willing to do was stretching and foam rolling around on the floor, I would rather them do something than nothing. I do think the time can be spent more productively. I do think they can do a lot more with it, but I would rather somebody do some movement. I'd rather somebody do a 8-week mobility plan or yoga plan or whatever it might be and enjoy, because that's something they see as valuable in their, whatever their core tenets are, whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine. You know what I mean? It's absolutely not a problem for me to say, go ahead, go nuts. That's you. I have a lady I coach for powerlifting who loves mobility. I do not program it. I do not prescribe it, but she is like subscribed to a guy who does a whole mobility plan. And that's on her. If she enjoys it and she likes making the time for it, that's fine. The other piece of that is, as you mentioned, mobility days. I would look at the groups that would typically have these things. I would usually think of, let's say, like people who do CrossFit would generally have like these big mobility days and they're all rolling around on the floor. I would imagine for a massive amount of that, though, it's more the social element than it is what they're actually doing. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it is a bit of groupthink. Well, the coach said this is going to improve my bottom of my squat position, or I'm going to like roll out my lat here and I'll have a better overhead position. Sure, whatever. He's wrong, but whatever.
Yeah.
I think it generally boils down to being part of the group. Like in abs on a Sunday morning, I don't think a lot of the things people are doing are necessarily about what it is they're doing. I think it's those 15 to 20 minutes prior to training that everybody's socializing. Because, everyone's coming in early. It's like 8:30, 8:45. Everyone's drinking their coffee. They're like, I think, purposefully moving a little slower to like slowly start to bring themselves into the mindset, now I'm going to have to work up heavy on a squat.
Yeah.
Because this is actually a revelation I had recently with Vinny, one of my, Vinny, obviously, one of the boys. He and I both work as coaches and trainers. So like all for the past like 6 years, I'd routinely be up at 4:30 in the morning to go in. And when I worked in FlyFit, I'd be open in the gym. So for me, coming into train at 9 is like nothing. It's a nothing thing. That's a normal day for me. Yeah. But for some people, it's genuinely hard to be out of bed on a Sunday.
Middle of the night,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's that. It's sometimes people need, like you mentioned, you touched off, like people don't need to do 15 minutes walking on a treadmill before they squat.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. Yeah. But I think for some people, it's coming out of one headspace and into another headspace. And I know that's kind of completely detached from what we're actually discussing.
Yeah.
But I think it all ties in,
I think to just calm down, some people are probably right now fucking cursing at the radio or at the phone or whatever, is that, yes, doing something is always better than doing nothing, right? And in fairness, it's most of the stuff you're doing is probably not going to have any negative impact.
100%.
So for me personally, I look at it from an time efficiency. I'm busy. I have loads of other things going on. I only train 3 days a week because I just don't have the time to train for, and priorities list dictate that. But like you say, being up at 9 in the morning, like some Sundays now, especially at 9 o'clock, I'll be leaving Galway at around 6 in the morning to come up to train, to turn around and go home again. Mm-hmm. I'll be spending 5 hours on the road to come and train for 3 hours. But I get up at 5:30 every morning myself anyway. So to me, it's no different. But then I'm coming for that experience, as you say, that environment to do what I want to do and to help me progress. So if some of those people find that 15, 20 minutes beforehand gets them more sort of psyched up or more excited or feel more prepared, as I say, work away. My biggest thing, and I'll always say it, is just be aware of what you're doing, what it actually is doing, and not being sold to you by some charlatan about what it is when it actually isn't the case.
Yeah,
that's my biggest thing.
That is a lot of fitness, and I don't even think it's done intentionally by a lot of people, but they're all reading out of the charlatan's handbook. Yeah. It's like, create a problem, sell you the solution.
Exactly.
So to very quickly jump forward, you and I have discussed, and I'm sure you've discussed openly online as well, one of the biggest pages on Instagram that kind of talks about a lot of the things we're trying to dispel here is Squat University. Yeah. Dr. Aaron Horschig, who I've met in person. Okay. Fucking super nice guy, really cool guy. Yeah. And I think you would agree, I don't think he is somebody that is purposely trying to not help. I think what happened to him, and correct me if you have a completely different opinion, I do want to get your thoughts on this, and him in general and what he does, what he sells. I think he's somebody he happened to find a username that was very universally, like everybody, I think we went through a kind of bit of a renaissance period through the 2010s where more and more gyms were getting like squat racks, deadlift platforms. Because I remember when I first started going to a gym, you were lucky if your gym had one squat rack. Yeah. Now every gym, like when I was working in FlyFit, there was 22 squat stations in the whole gym, which is massive. Yeah. So I think it was a happenstance. He happened to have a page with a very palatable name, Squat University, and I'd imagine when he started, it was helping like particularly like Olympic weightlifters and things overcome what he saw as some mobility issues based on what he's done in his physiotherapy course or whatever it is he's done in the American equivalent. And then it's as the page got bigger and he got asked to solve more and more and more problems, he couldn't say, I don't know. Because it started to becoming about being the authority in that position. So it started to manufacture answers. And now I think it's gotten to the point where he actually actively has to like stonewall even when he is completely in the wrong.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? And it's because it will impact his brand if he was to backpedal. Because I know he's actively said going in and warming up on an empty bar is not an efficient way to warm up. And I personally would quiz that because I'm not training as long as this guy and I can out squat him. Do you know what I mean? Now I'm not. I know there's far more that goes into it than strictly just how hard you train.
Yeah.
But still, for somebody who's in the game as long as he is, for somebody who is doing what he does, I think taking that stance when you have not a leg to stand on is a pretty like precarious position to put yourself in as a professional and as somebody with a lot of eyes. But regardless to all that, let's get some of your thoughts. Squat University.
So, like, people think I just shit on him all the time, right? But I think he does that himself. So, personally, I have nothing against the man. And as I said to you in the past conversations, he is genuinely trying to help people. His issue is that he will not change his stance based on contradictory evidence and stuff that he says that has been completely debunked. And some very, very well-known people are calling him out. Do you know Aaron's been invited on 7 different podcasts and he's turned them all down because he knows he's going to be challenged? If you honestly believe your point and you can back what you say, why would you not debate anyone on it? Okay. Yes, he may think it may hurt his brand, but again, if you start reading the comments under those posts, you will notice people are coming to the realization that not everything that he says is true. Yes, some people find some stuff helpful, and that's all good and well. But what we need to remember is that just because you feel this does not mean this is happening. We have to stop that narrative that everyone experiences a certain movement issue or a pain issue has the same problem, which therefore means have the same resolution. I can have 20 clients come to me with back pain and I can have 20 different programs given to those people because it's relevant to that person. So one of his biggest things is his foot fetish, right? Now, I wear wide toe shoes because I think they're fucking comfortable. They look like shit to some people. I couldn't care. I don't care what people think. I wear them because they're comfortable. They do not cure bunions. They do not cure a load of things that he says. But just coincidentally, he now has a wide box toe shoe that's going to wide box squat shoe that's going to solve all your foot issues. So again, we're going to the point where you've created a problem and just by pure coincidence, look at this. I have the solution for $999. Do you know what I mean? So he has this nocibic view where a particular thing will have an outcome.
Yes.
And that shit isn't the case. It's just not. And there's very few people that will stand over that. And even recently enough, him and Andrew Locke came up with this study. I can't remember the topic at this point, but they had it published by what they call a predatory journal. Right. So you basically pay them to publish a paper.
Right.
There's no peer reviewing. You pay them, they publish it.
That's bizarre.
So why wouldn't you go through a peer-reviewed process if you honestly believed your study based on your whatever you've done to get to that point, your knowledge and your theory? If you can back it up and it's credible, why wouldn't you have a peer-reviewed and published where everyone else publishes their stuff? These are the things where people need to realize he refuses to debate any point. If you look at all his posts, everyone says, oh my God, this is so helpful. Thank you very much. It's like, oh, no problem. And 10 seconds later, you can reply, go, but hang on, what happens if we take this point of view? You will not get a reply. I've challenged him on numerous things and not coming across by all means as a dick. I've questioned in general, said, but okay, what happens if we take this point of view? I'm trying to come across professional and debate. Nothing.
Well, I suppose what's important, and this is where I think I speak to Dan here at Primal an awful lot about this, I think it is a perfectly acceptable thing to ask somebody to take, if they're going to stand their ground and die on a certain hill, you've every right to challenge the points they make. If you disagree, that's not the issue. I think it becomes an issue when people resort to ad hominem attacks and they attack the individual.
Yes.
You started off by saying, seems like a genuine guy who's trying to help. And I would completely agree. I think it's, like you said, when you're not willing to, maybe he doesn't want to platform the debates, and that's fine. You know, maybe if he was to say, I'd be willing to talk to these people off camera, so it's not like a selling point. But there is where I think where the problem lies. I think it's gotten to the point for this person on his page is that it's now a brand. It's not necessarily a page that's tooled towards helping people specifically. It's something, he's selling a product. He's selling books, and now he's selling fucking shoes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if he was to go and debate, let's just say Jordan Feigenbaum or Austin Baraki of Barbell Medicine, those are two hyper intelligent people who are very up to date.
Yeah.
And I would imagine they would, for lack of a better word, professionally tear him a new one.
100%.
That can only hurt the sales of his books and his shoes and his potential seminars or whatever else he might do.
And this is where we have an issue. We have to weigh up revenue versus morals. You know, and this is the hard part, like, because obviously people like him are in this for the money.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously they do have a genuine interest in helping people. Otherwise they wouldn't have started from that point. Obviously he might have never realized the point he would have got to. If he looked back when he started to where he is now, he might never thought he would get there. So it was genuine. But then the influx of potential partnerships and sponsorships and those kind of stuff comes in, money comes in. As you say, how much of a detriment will that have to him if he starts saying, well, actually, sorry, I was wrong here. This is correct. Is it going to be a likes of Liver King whole thing where he's probably going to have zero impact after what happened with this, the anabolics? So will it impact him enough financially? What, you know, I don't know. But I think morally you still have to respond to people that have a genuine concern that there could be another way to look at something or an opposing view. And it's about debating. It's not about arguing or trying to prove who has the bigger dick. It's literally just trying to hammer out the best for people, not for you or me. It's not to prove, as I say, it's not to prove who's right. It's like, but that has been debunked by this. So what do you say to that? Why would you not accept this view based on X, Y, and Z? You know, it's maturity. Like, it's just, I've said things and people have challenged me in my stories before and stuff, and I'll give them my view. And if I listen to their view and go, that's fine. I'm not going to agree with you because of X, Y, and Z. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just going to stick with what I believe because of the way I've learned it or I've seen it or whatever the case is. And we have to be careful of basing your point off of personal experience and anecdotal versus actual quality metadata, like not just one study, but like a broad study that fitted the strictest of criteria that gave you credible evidence versus, well, I mean, Ian has 2 million followers, so sure he has to be right, like, you know, but that's not really,
I think so a couple of things. Firstly, I think you're absolutely right. When it comes, this is the way I would generally personally try to approach any kind of debate or argument or whatever you want to call it. Instead of coming at the person and strictly just defending my point, I would say, well, look, they're bringing something to the table, I'm bringing something to the table, and here's the tangle of wires between us. Let's work together to untangle it. Because while we may never see exactly eye to eye, there's probably value on both sides.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that I could say, like, I think on a fundamental level, what I would disagree with when I look at pages like Squat University is that I think to the average person that doesn't know a whole pile about how the body works, so barbell medicine operate in the biopsychosocial model, not the biomechanical model, which a lot of these practitioners seem to do. They basically treat people like they're bloody machines.
Robots, yeah. And
this tends to be where the problem lies. You know, every symptom has a fix, which is kind of the issue. And that was one of the main things you said earlier on. I actually wanted to come back around to was I think that's the problem is everybody wants a diagnosis because they want an answer.
Yeah.
And that's because it will make it easier for them to understand. And I think this is where things tend to slip up. Like people say things like, oh, I have a slip disc. It's like, right, discs don't slip.
Yeah.
That is a word that was used by someone before to explain it to the general public and has now been completely taken out of context. I think this incredibly robust structure in your back can just go, whoops, you know?
Yeah.
So same with this. I think it's that point. It's that you could have the most well-meaning intentions to help someone, but I think you need to look at who it is you help. And there's a certain degree of, like, I think anyone can post online whatever the hell they want. Like to a degree,
course,
obviously. Like not
once you're willing to accept that someone might challenge it, and you
precisely.
Know,
I think the problem in his case is that it got to the point where he's so visible in our sphere, in the fitness or training or particularly powerlifting, weightlifting, these kinds of sports, that there's now a degree of responsibility for what you post because you could potentially post something harmful. Yeah. You know, I think it's different when you've 2,000 or 3,000 followers to when you've 2 or 3 million followers, which he does. He has millions of followers. And I think there's a degree of like responsibility that comes with that. But I think the issue.
Sorry, I'll give you one thing. He went from 2 down to 1.8, just to let you know.
Really?
I noticed that when someone sent me, because I don't follow him anymore.
Right.
Just that someone sent me, I was like, geez, hang on a second, that's weird. He was 2 million a couple months back, now he's 1.8. Was that just fake accounts or something, or was it just,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
that's gonna happen to
that's the thing. I suppose we don't know. You know, that, because that's kind of the thing. People are fucking wising up to you, prick. You know, well, it could also be that they just stripped out a lot of the bots. You know? It could be a million and one different things. Dare not speculate. But the point is that now that he is definitely seeing the pushback, because he's one person, and I wonder if it's still just him behind the page.
This is another,
Do you know? Yeah. But in any case, this is kind of what I'd bring to you, right? Because he's somebody with 1.8 million followers, right? And you've got 2,000 or 3,000 or something?
2,000.
Right. So do you ever get, well, you're just this? And it's like this general public thing where they make this appeal to a greater authority because, well, they've all these followers. So they've much more clout than you because they've more followers. Because let's face it, in 2023, your follower count is a massive amount. It's like that episode of Black Mirror where, did you ever see that, where people had like the rating system on it?
No,
watch it. So, oh God, I'm going to do like a TV review. It's a TV show called Black Mirror where it's like it's a dystopian near future event in each episode. It's all different stories. And one of them was everybody had what looked like basically like Instagram, but you would rate it out of 5 stars. Okay. And it was like your social credit score if you got more and more and more 5 stars. So, you know, if you were a 4.5 star person, you know, you were doing pretty good. But if you were like a 5 star, you're like a celebrity basically. So you get invited to things and you could get into better housing and better like loans from the bank and things like that, you know? So in any case, it's like that. He would, in 2023, given his follower count, he will be perceived to be at a higher authority strictly because the groupthink is more followers equals more authority. How do you process that as somebody in the same field, obviously in a much more evidence-based capacity, you're much more up to date and probably not as attached to the one modality as him? How do you come at this?
It doesn't faze me. It obviously, to some degree, some people will judge the fact that's, sure, what the fuck do you know? Also, when did he start? When did he start doing his journey? And when did I start? We're years and years apart on social media. I don't post as much as I probably should, whereas he's posting at least once a day. I would assume probably sometimes twice a day. I'm posting maybe once a week. My followers could probably increase massively if I put more effort into it as well. But to me, I don't have the time. I spend it more, and I get my benefit to me in terms of when it comes to social media. I'm fortunate where 90% of my business is referrals. So I'm not relying on my Instagram account to get me business. So to me, I'm just putting out content trying to help people. I'm not trying to draw anyone in from that really, because not to sound obnoxious, I don't need to. It's purely referrals. So I don't really have to go looking for it, and it's not a revenue stream for me. But unfortunately, people will take quantitative amount of followers versus actual people. And as I say, I'm not saying he's wrong or don't listen to anything he says, but just take with a pinch of salt that just because you have a similar sensation or pain doing a certain movement does not mean his stipulation is that it's going to fix you or help you or at all. Do you know? And like he gives away a lot of his free, you know, he does it. I think you type squat something under his post and you win a chance to work with him for a month or something. So he is genuinely trying to help people, as I say, and I'll keep saying that. It's not a personal attack on him, but when you have that many followers, you have a moral obligation of giving correct and proven correct information, not misinformation or false guidance.
And I suppose that's the big thing with it. It's because it isn't presented as, oh, you could try this. It's no, this is what you should do.
Yeah, exactly.
And that absolutely is it, because he has actually, and that just obviously sticks out in my mind because he particularly picked the way I warm up and said it's not optimal. I was like, you prick. But then
you can go to, then you talk to people who, you know, world record squat holders, and I'm sure there's plenty of them that don't do anything, get under a bar. So how have they managed to get to elite level without doing optimal? And that brings you to people like, say, Ben Yanes, who is another one that this is optimal. It's like, if you have shoulder pain doing bench press, it's because we're not designed to bench press. Sorry,
that's
what?
Bizarre, yeah. I've seen
like,
that guy, yeah.
What the fuck? Can anyone actually tell me what are we designed to do? Do you know what I mean?
Whatever we want.
Do you know what I mean?
Adaptable.
Exactly. Like, you just expose yourself something gradually and you'll adapt to it. Like, it's not, you know, there are physical restrictions to individuals and that's fine. But claiming that just because you experience shoulder pain in bench press, it's because we're not designed to do it, or we're only designed to press narrowly and not press from a wider stance. I mean, this is some, and you're starting to try and completely change the way people train. Whereas the issue is not enough people train. It's not how people are training. It's the fuck they're not doing it like.
Yeah.
So let's just get them in. And if they want to bench press, let them bench press the fucking way they want to. Then not do it because they're afraid it might hurt their shoulders because that's not the way they're built. That if we need to supinate this way before we do a curl, or we're not going to stimulate the one of the heads, or all this kind of bullshit. Just fucking hit every muscle. Just flex your elbow, extend your elbow. There's your bicep and tricep done. That's all you have to worry about. Don't worry about angles and positions and stuff. Just move. Get in and train. Lift the load. Do some resistance training of some description before you even look at optimal. Because as far as it comes to movement, optimal is probably not going to benefit 99.5% of people.
Well, and you said it best yourself. The thing we want as people in this field, more than anything, is just to get more people to exercise. Doesn't matter how you do it. Do whatever the hell you want. You can go do an ass and abs or a body pump class in your local gym. You can do powerlifting, you can do weightlifting, you can do bodybuilding, you can do calisthenics, you can do CrossFit. It doesn't matter. You do cross-country running, cycling, skiing, swimming. Just get moving, because ultimately this will yield the better health outcomes that we're looking for.
Yeah. And increase your heart rate, build up a sweat, and if you can, stimulate a few muscles. That's the basics. Just do that. Do that 3 times a week, and fucking your life will change completely.
I think what the problem is, or what tends to be the issue, is that you'll get people that have gone down one particular vein. Like if you get somebody, let's say in bodybuilding, well, maybe if they're trying to absolutely maximize the size of their bicep, maybe certain things do matter. But to Susan that's just going to the gym twice a week and does a bit of spinning, it probably doesn't.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
And that's where you have to look when you get your advice from. So bodybuilder in certain ways, and I say, well, to stimulate this tissue better, we're better at doing isometric or a half rep to keep load, things like this. Whereas I'm always coming from the point of joints and going, let's just look for longevity and everything, and let's go full range of motion, because joints don't wear and tear, so we need to use them to the full capacity. It's when we don't do certain things, we're more likely to experience issues than when we do. So just, as I say, my biggest thing for anyone going into a gym, especially when it comes to your accessories, if you're a compound lifter, is full range of motion, and all your accessories will always provide you great value for longevity in bone density, joint health, all that kind of stuff, over half reps just to have a bigger looking bit of tissue.
Now, one of the last things I do, and there's 2 last things I really want to touch on, which one of the last ones is, have you ever had, given what you're saying now, like, so again, it's very much, I would say, a movement positive mindset. It's, you can go in and do things. You can go in and move. You don't have to, there's not all these prerequisites you have to achieve before you start exercising. You can just exercise. Have you ever had major pushback on this? Be it from a client, an athlete, anything, like another practitioner? Have you ever come to like a head-to-head or like button heads with somebody over what it is you say? Or is it always, are people generally being receptive?
Nothing's jumping out at me, to be honest. And that's not saying because I agree with everyone, but I'm always open to debate. And I always say to people in my posts, like, I'll try remember to put in most of my posts that this is just, most of it's my opinion. Yes, it might be based off studies I've read, but most of it's my opinion. And like, as I say, like ourselves, we all have one. Everyone's entitled to it. And if you have a different one, geez, by all means, because the only way you're going to learn is by looking at things from different points of view.
For sure.
And you have to accept that. And I do. I don't know, as some people think maybe I'm just too ignorant and they won't challenge me. I don't know. But I know I sometimes come across as maybe not approachable or ignorant or a dickhead or whatever. But I'm very approachable and always willing to listen to people give me their point of view. Once you don't come at me personally, and just come at me based on what you've experienced or what someone's told you before. Like I do often get people coming to me and going, I went to a physio and he told me X, Y, and Z, and I'd be like, that's bullshit. There's a lifter in one of the gyms, I won't mention, I don't know if in case the physio might listen, but he had back pain and she was pushing on each one of his vertebrae down the spine, and she found one that he reacted to, oh yeah, you have a bulging disc there. And I was like, fuck me. And then he was told not to squat. His back pain came after squats, not during it, just afterwards. And she told him not to squat, so he didn't squat for full summer. This is a competitive powerlifter.
Yeah, this physio obviously had X-ray vision.
Do you know what I mean? So he didn't squat for full summer. Went back to squatting, first session, pain was there. And I was like, but sure, that's why you have to do the movement that's causing you pain as a benchmark to see if the pain's getting better. Not doing the thing that hurts is going to stop the pain, obviously.
Yeah.
But then you come back, if you have to come back to it, where do you go like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes the poison is the cure.
100%. That's why I say just reduce the load till the pain is tolerable. And then keep managing at that point while we work on X, Y, and Z. And for sometimes that's all it needed. It's just a bit of load reduction. Keep the pain there. Flirt with the pain a bit. Like have it that's tolerable. You're not changing the way you move. And just keep going with that and watch, see if, as the sessions and weeks go by, does that pain get less with the same load? Happy days. Now we can increase the load.
So I'd imagine that's the point though, isn't it? When you have to contend with what other people are encountering from other physios.
Yeah.
And I suppose you have to build that trust and relationship with them that like you actually truly have their best interest at heart. You're not going against this person as a contentious point. It's to actually get them back to the activity that they're trying to do.
And also the fact that not everyone you go to is actually a physio. Because we get, a lot of GA is a big one where, I went to the local GA physio. No, he's a massage therapist that did a 3-week course somewhere. Physiotherapy in Ireland's actually a trademark name where I'm a physical therapist. I'm not a chartered physiotherapist. If I go and call myself a physio, I can be sued by Physio Ireland as such because I'm using a protected name.
Sure.
So that's why I get people coming to me and I know the person they've been to. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to say to them, but they're not a physio and they're not anywhere near one. So we need to be cautious that we're taking advice from someone that doesn't know anatomy at all, or exercise for that matter.
Okay, so then that I suppose this is the biggest point I would make to anybody that is in this position, and if anybody is like even somewhat like set off by the conversation we're having. It's which world would you rather live in? Would you rather live in a world where we're this delicate and prone to like movement ailment and you're so far away from your greatest potential because you don't, your knee slightly rocks in when you squat? Or would you rather live in a world where a lot of those things aren't as important as the fact that you can get up and just move in whatever way feels the best to you? I would personally rather live in the world we actually live in where human body is very, very adaptable, very robust and capable, tough, and we can adapt to most things, assuming that we do it in a smart way. And I suppose that's where people fall down the most. They tend to do things in sometimes the not smartest way. And then the other side of it is sometimes just shy happens to us. And it tends to be less about what has physically happened and more about how we feel about what's happened. And that's kind of the last real point I wanted to bring up is the importance of, despite our, like whether or not you've got somebody like Aaron Horsig with nearly 2 million followers or somebody like yourself or myself with near enough around 2,000, it's the way we communicate is probably the key. We could be trying to get at the same message, but how that person perceives that is going to be greatly dictated by the language we use, the way we deliver it, and in many ways the intent we have behind it. Because people are empathetic and social and they do kind of pick these things up. And I think that's kind of the intangible part of all the things we do. Like powerlifting is binary. It's just lifting weights in a very fixed range. Like even corrective exercise, it's just repetition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's those other parts that I think tend to be the biggest part. And I suppose as somebody who, you physically in many ways will have to physically touch people or correct people, and people have to trust in the process of what it is you're telling them to do because it's a delayed gratification. So trust and communication is a massive piece of your role, as it must be in mine.
Yeah, it is. And like say for example, at the client this week where last week that had been to a physio for whatever reason that she has going on, she said, I feel like I just need to have needles done. And I was like, okay, like I know in my head needles aren't going to solve the problem. But I said, that's fine, call in, we'll do that for 10 minutes and then we'll go off and do what I think we can experiment to see what's going on, But for her, if I didn't do that needling, she would have gone off wondering, what if I had that needling done? Mm-hmm. Would it have... So I did it for her because I know straight away that'll settle her mind. She's come in for specifically to have something done. I've done it. She's now happy. I've explained to her before she came in, this is what I'll need to do. She wanted it in her glutes. I'm explaining to her, look, so we're going to have to expose the side of your bum because the needles come in the side. I'll have towels over you, all that kind of stuff, just to give you a heads up so you don't think I'm just stripping you off on the table. And we'll do that. It'll take 5 or 10 minutes and then we'll go off and we'll figure out what the exercises are aggravating, blah, blah, blah. But the point of the matter is she then was happy that I did what she wanted. Mm-hmm. Now I could bring off and educate her on the other side of the realm of rehab and exercise because I would say the majority of, I'd say people, one-to-ones for me, I'd say 85 to 90% of people don't even touch my plinth or my bed. We discuss the issue and we go straight to the gym. Mm-hmm. Because as I say to people, like I get people coming to me for massages, don't get me wrong, and I do it. I do needling and stuff. I get people that love a good massage and that's fine. But I just don't use it as a tool to solve problems. If anything, it might give you some placebo effect of symptoms, but it's not going to solve your problems. Movement in general, and just having someone to talk to sometimes can really dull your pain. If we have time, I can give you a quick example of, I had a client come to me, this is about 2 years ago now. He's full-time in the French Air Force. And he was dating a girl in Ireland, so he was coming across on his weekend off every 6 or 8 weeks, whatever the case was. And he booked in to see me, and he had this lower back pain. And this man was tall, dark, and handsome. He would nearly turn you. He was like 6'5", like ripped to the bone. I was like, well, clearly this lad's in a gym goer, good shape, grand. So he said to me, basically, anytime he went to deflection, he had this pain on his lower back, and just, so I was talking to him, and he kept saying he could remember exactly when it happened. And it happened 18 months before this. I was like, for you to remember something so specific like that, to me, I'm like, there's a big part of your brain that's hanging on to this, like, and this isn't to go all wishy-washy, whatever. But anyway, so I was like, right, okay, cool. I was like, just show me, say, for instance, try touch your toes. Tell me at what point does it feel discomfort? And like, he couldn't get to his knee, right? And he was like, oh, straight away, no. I was like, all right, okay, cool. So I brought him out into the where I was in a different clinic at the time, and we had an exercise room as such. I brought him out there, and I made him do 3 or 4 things completely unrelated at all. He had no clue, just to distract him for a few minutes. Then I got him to get a wooden dowel, and I got him to do basically like a Jefferson curl, where he had rubbed the dowel all the way down his legs to the ground. And the first rep, he got to like already his mid-shin. Second rep, down to his ankle. By the 5th rep, he was touching the floor. I hadn't said anything yet. All I was saying to him the whole time was, okay, yeah, keep going, keep breathing, in, out. I just kept talking, so he was listening to me and not focusing on what he was doing as such. And by rep 5, he was touching the floor. I made him do another 5 reps, kept going as the whole time. Yep, keep breathing in, keep breathing. Yeah, that's it. Kept talking. And after the 10th rep, he stood up. And he just looked at me, just shook his head. And I was like, now what's wrong with you? He was like, nothing. I'm like, exactly. It just, sometimes it's purely just hanging on to something, and you just haven't gone to that position again from fear of the pain or something happening. How it happened was he was doing a drill. We had to pick up a heavy box, throw it out of a plane, and jump out afterwards, like to use something to do with vision focus or something like that, to catch the box in midair. And as he went to pick up the box, it was heavy, and he felt this twinge or something. And from that day, it just never went away. So I know it wasn't a weakness. It's 18 months down the line. It wasn't a tissue, like it wasn't pathology or anything like that. It was purely a fear of a position. And like, it's not always the case it's that simple, but there is cases where there is physically fuck all wrong with you. You just have this attachment to a position. And if distract you for a second and get you into a position, you yourself realizes, holy shit, off you go. So he was in there 15, 20 minutes, adios, see you later. That was it. No exercises, nothing, done, dusted. You've now realized, if you want, you can go practice that again just to reinforce yourself. But now I could have milked him for that. Like, I could have milked him and said, right, we need another 5 more sessions because of, I could have made up a load of bullshit. Like, and that's where we need to realize that sometimes there's nothing I can do. And there's sometimes it's something so simple that doesn't really need to see me for, and this is where, as you say, it's not always that we're robots, that there's a structural problem. Sometimes it's purely like fear. Pain is in your head. Okay, It's not that it doesn't exist. That's not physical. You can't pick it up and move it. Okay, but if we realize that we can build, if we have fear around the movement because of pain, you're going to be a shitload longer coming back from that pain than anything else. And that's the hardest part of my job. It's a psychological aspect of people, especially the longer they've been in pain in the movement, the harder it can be to get them to do that movement with confidence and not apprehend or anticipate the pain that might or might not come. It's that scenario, what happens if it comes? What happens if it doesn't? Just fucking move and let's have a look. Like, worst thing it's going to do, it's going to hurt. That's it. And I try not to undermine their pain, but also try to dull it down that it's just pain. Nothing's going to break. Just do it and let's see what happens. Take that fear away and just go, okay, it's a bit of pain. Like, if it's really bad, I can take a paracetamol. But like, I'm not going to break. So let me just flirt with it and see what happens.
That must have been incredibly liberating for him.
Oh, like he just, like, there was I don't know how long, it felt like forever. He was just shaking his head at me, like, and I was like.
But I can only imagine, because he'd been carrying that with him for months.
18 months, yeah.
Like, mentally, even just the weight of that, to have it just gone as something. I'd imagine a part of him felt simultaneously relief and kind of felt a bit silly. Yeah,
because he brought his girlfriend with him because his language, like his English was pretty good, but she could translate anything he was kind of having trouble explaining. But like, it was universal. He knew straight away. It was like, what the fuck? It's not like some people say to me, oh, it's wizardry or it's witchcraft. I'm like, it's not. Like, it's just, I'm just showing you what you needed to see. That's all. Like, I didn't do anything. Yeah. I knew at the time, the way he was talking, I could just tell by his language, his mindset, everything. I could just tell there was physically nothing wrong with this man at all. And like yourself and myself, if it's affecting the way you can train, man, that can be psychologically so exhausting on you. Like when you can't do the thing you need to or love to. Yep. The psychological downside of that is far worse than the physical.
And that is the crux of it, isn't it? For a lot of people, it's not the pain in and of itself. It's it's the anticipatory anxiety of what this means for all these other activities that they're involved in. Yeah. Like if they what if I can't go to training with my friends? What if I can't go out with my friends after training? And
can't do this competition this year.
Exactly. And it's kind of one of the bigger points, and it's something that, like I said, this whole conversation, I think, is to really help people to understand that there is a certain degree of liberty and freedom with movement, and you don't need to confine yourself into this little box.
Yeah. You can train every muscle in 20 different ways. So if a certain particular movement pattern for that muscle hurts, we have plenty of fucking other options. Yeah. Now, yes, if you're a powerlifter, you have to squat, bench, and deadlift. We can't. But in terms of exercises around that, so that you can still maintain some strength, but maybe take a small load off some of those movements, there's options. There's always options. There's always options come to movement. And that's why I think so much of my business online is because I don't have to touch you. I don't have to feel you. I don't have to see you. I don't have to poke you. I don't have to rub you. All I have to do is listen to you firstly, look at what else has gone wrong. I do watch how you lift, and that's mainly to see how you train or how you move, because there's certain movements that'll benefit someone that trains a certain way, and how I look how their knees track over their ankles, their hips, stuff like that. Not to change it, but just so I know certain movements will probably suit them better than you because of the way you train. And that's why I can have 20 exercises for the same joint, but it's based on the person it's for. And that's why you can go into likes of abs where you can see 10 or 15 people I might have seen, and you might see them doing some sort of a warm-up they enjoy, that I've given them in the past to help an issue. And you'll see that very few of them will be doing the same. There might be one that quite a few might be doing, but if you look at the overall program, no one has the same program. Like,
from there.
Do you know?
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head like that. Like sometimes people just need someone to listen to them. Yeah. And they probably felt he probably felt very lost with that. Yeah. Experience for 18 months, and then he put his trust in you and it yielded the result, and that's why I said must be in this massive relief. I'll call it, the way I want to wrap it up is Adam Phillips has a saying, Adam Phillips Odyssey Strength. I've said it a couple of times. He says powerlifting, so training in general, is simple and people are complex. And I think that's really the crux of what this is. It's that the pain in and of itself is not this complex thing, but it's all what that radiates out into people's life. And I suppose it's really keeping the big picture for us as people that promote movement, taking care of yourself, moving around, enjoying your body. It's what can we do to keep you engaged in the activities that you enjoy doing? And if you do need to take time away from it, what can we do to help you get back to it and enjoy it without this fear or this thing hanging over you or feeling in some way vulnerable or delicate or fragile?
And that's the thing, like the more you can expose, and as well, that I say to people, like the more positions, exercises, movements you can expose yourself to, the less likeliness you're going to have discomfort in them because your body's exposed to them. So there is no such thing as dangerous movement. Just enjoy movement at all. Obviously you have your training, but outside that, just can explore different movements and stuff. There's be amazed at what position you can get into when you just try, and not be afraid of them or think that they're odd.
Well, I think we can wrap it up there. TJ, it was a great one. Thank you very much for coming on.
No problem at all.
And we'll probably have you on again. I don't think we've even half discussed half the stuff we could have.
You're going forever, but sure.
Thanks very much.
No bother at all.